Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Hey, Mike. Hey, Jan. You're in the right place if you're ready to nerd out on some sales process and methodology goodness. Hey, Morgan. Hey, Rachel. Thanks, everyone, for joining on. We usually don't do these on Fridays, but I'm feeling the Friday vibe. It's good. Yeah, we'll give everyone maybe a couple minutes to funnel in from the last sales call or pipeline review meetings or follow-up notes, whatever we're doing. But we have an awesome session today by two amazing sales leaders. We're joined by Pleasant and Elizabeth. Maybe to kick off, we'll do some quick intros, and I can start. Some Ross, CEO and co-founder of Accord. We like to host these what we call masterclass sessions on different very kind of timely topics, like this one today around sales efficiency and methodologies. And work on a company called Accord, which is kind of sponsoring all these events. So feel free to check out our website. And I'll let Pleasant and Elizabeth introduce themselves, but maybe to make this a bit more interactive before we start digging in, we're going to do an icebreaker. If you can share in the chat and change your chat to all panelists, sorry, to everyone, if you have the option there in the chat, where you're calling in from, and a recent book that you've read and enjoyed. So I'm calling in from just north of Toronto here in Canada. And I recently read, I'm a big sci-fi fantasy book reader. I like the escapism of kind of the usual business and sales books. And I just read Ready Player One, which is a classic that I can't believe I missed. And took that down in like 2 or 3 nights because it was so awesome. Yeah. So Pleasant, I'll let you introduce yourself first here and share where you're calling in from and a recent book that you've read and enjoyed.
I am in Virginia, about an hour and a half west of DC, so kind of near Northern Virginia area. Recent one, I kind of picked up one off of our shelf that's an oldie but goodie, which is The Richest Man in Babylon, which probably everyone's read, but always good little nuggets as refreshers and things to look at. I have been working as a manager with Nextroll for the past 2 years. I manage our growth segment. Seen a ton of changes at the company, and previously, just starting out, just a little background, was a teacher for many years and started off that way, and then haphazardly met Mark Costaglow and got into the great world of SaaS sales with Outreach, and it was a rocket ship from there. So I started with them when it was super small, and spent 4 years there, and then worked at Pendo for a couple of years also, and then landed here.
Awesome. Thank you, Pleasant. And Elizabeth, how about yourself?
Excellent. Hi, everyone. I am Elizabeth Andrew. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I actually have a great answer to this question because I usually am a startup leader, and I typically don't have a ton of time to read for pleasure. I just took 3 weeks off in the Florida Keys over the holidays and read 4 books. The one that I just finished is Born in Crime by Trevor Noah.
That's a great
so
one.
Entertaining, and really enjoyed reading. Not only he's funny, but also growing up in apartheid South Africa, it was really interesting. So I'm a 3-time VP of sales. I have worked with companies like HelloSign and Dropbox and Natomi and Pluma. I've been through 2 acquisitions. I actually started out in the investment industry and then was a 17-year stay-at-home mom. So I launched a career in tech with no tech background at my late 40s, and it's been a great run ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, I had no idea about Trevor Noah's background before reading that last year as well, and I was kind of blown away by some of those stories. Seeing some great books here. Chet, I happened to randomly also read North Mythology over the US Thanksgiving. It was super entertaining. And if you liked, what was this? The Avengers movie with Thor, all of that suddenly makes sense, and all the names and all that stuff kind of come from the North Mythology. That was, yeah, really good. Super fun book for anyone looking for maybe something a little more fun and not the usual sales and startup books. Awesome. Well, we'll kick things off. Again, you're in the right place if you're looking to up level your sales leadership skills by learning a bit more about methodologies and sales processes. So maybe to kick things off and set the stage, what is and why is it important to have a sales methodology in a sales team? Maybe we can go in reverse order. Elizabeth, if you want to kick things off, like what is it, maybe just to like speak the same language here, like what does it mean to have a sales methodology and sales process at a company, and why is it so important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because there's so many methodologies out there, and I know we're talking a little bit about MEDD and some of those today,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things that is so important to have a repeatable process. And I was very fortunate early on in my career as an investment mutual fund wholesaler. I was trained by the #2 institutional, or what we call enterprise now, investment wholesaler in the world at the time, who was probably making $5 million in commission. And in those days, we called it a business plan. Now it's all methodologies, right? But it was creating a business plan of really mapping out exactly what your day-to-day activities are going to be, that's going to help generate a process. And it takes everything down from every engagement with your customers, and so I learned how to do that very, very early on, and I've used that process in literally everything I've done, even relaunching a career, is just creating a plan. It's a plan on how you're gonna build, and so I've found it's absolutely critical, and it's the difference between success and failure.
Totally, I love that. Yes, at the end of the day, it's a million words for it, but it is a plan, a framework, a strategy to repeatedly drive success. And if you want to have consistency and predictability, which everyone wants in sales, you need to have that as kind of the backbone. But Pleasant, anything to add or +1 to that?
Well, definitely +1, but I think one of the main things that a methodology does is it helps to level the playing field within your organization of your sellers. I mean, Elizabeth just said she, started a tech industry, and later on, and I came from being a teacher, and so there's just certain things that if you want your organization to grow and be successful, you need to level the playing field. And so it helps to train and set a standard of how we approach customers, what we get from them in order to move them along in the sales cycle in an efficient way, and de-risk as much as possible. So I really see it as leveling the playing field for your sellers.
Totally. And maybe before we move on, do we think that there's a material difference from methodology to methodology, or is it just helpful to have a shared language and it kind of ends up being the same? This is, my personal opinion. I think, maybe for more strategic types of deals, there's a better one or worse, but like overall, my personal take is just having something is 100 times better than what the vast majority of teams that I see today have, or at least enforcing it, because most people say they have a process or methodology, don't actually do it. Just having one and doing the thing, I think, is significantly better. But I know some people are like all about one thing. Maybe they're all about Challenger or something. Do you kind of have a preference, or think that kind of all kind of equals each other?
I personally think that they all have threads of commonality between them. I mean, when you go and look and see what everything is putting together, whether it's Snap or Need or Medic or Challenger, it's there's always commonalities, but the level at which it's implemented really speaks to the complexity of your business. So I think that it's while they're very similar, some of them are different based off of who you're selling and what you are selling, and what you need to ensure you're doing within each sales cycle.
Totally.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, it's really important to look at the business. I tend to use MEDD when I'm going into a new startup and building out a sales process. But I think you need to look at the business. There's a big difference on whether it's enterprise or SMB or emerging market. Like, who is your target customer? Who is your ICP? There's different types of target ideal customers that may be a little bit more allergic to a traditional discovery process. So you really need to take a look at kind of what your buyer process looks like. And then the other thing is too, is, and this is very, very different from when I was starting out. And Ross, I know you and I've had this conversation a bit, but some tech companies have such strong marketing teams that a lot of it's inbound.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be a very different process if it's an inbound or an outbound strategy.
Totally. Yeah. So definitely agree. Overall, there's certain ones like, Medic and Challenger are very strong, I think, for selling to like C-suite, more strategic, longer sales cycles. Maybe if it's more transactional, other ones, kind of speak to that more. But overall, I think it's the devil's in the reinforcement and the actual enforcement and rigor of making sure that on every deal, every rep and every manager is coaching towards that, and that you have visibility into it through whatever the CRM or tools that you're using, versus, what the thing is itself.
Yeah. And I would add to that, like, I believe it's critical to have that process, that plan, like Pleasant was talking about, have a plan and a framework for every sales organization. Having said that, and I wouldn't say this to my sales teams particularly, but I have found that many of the best salespeople really don't need to follow a methodology. Mm-hmm. And many of them have studied all of them and over a decade or more, multiple decades, and don't necessarily need to follow that. So I usually, I require my teams, everybody to follow the same process, but it's usually that top 10% of my sales team, I can kind of let them do their own.
Well, I guess, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's less for them. It's less about like needing those fields in Salesforce and requiring it. It's more of they're doing it by nature, right? I don't think that they're not following the thing. I think that it's just so inherent with the muscle memory that they've built. They know the questions to ask. They know how to get to these people that, you're kind of like, I trust you that you're doing these things. And not everyone earns that. I think that's an earned level of, kind of self-ownership on the team, right? Or do you think they're just doing stuff that isn't defined and isn't part of the methodology or process, but they're just so good at selling?
That's absolutely right. And they're usually meshing together a lot of the different methodologies, right? But I still require them, like they still need to get that information in the framework that we use as a sales organization. And the reason for that is too, is like as a sales leader, and one of the hardest things, I've been in ICP, I've been in IC many times too, right? And it's like every salesperson hates putting all of their information into Salesforce or whatever.
Like, let me just work the deal. Like, why do I have to spend an extra 20 minutes doing this? But yeah.
Right. But as a leader and as an organization, like I want to know, hey, Ross is going on vacation next week, and one of his customers calls in. I want to know exactly where that deal is.
Totally. Well, maybe
it also pulls into the other parts of the organization, because even though a sales methodology is for the sales team, how we acquire new customers, there's so many inefficiencies when it comes to customer transition or looping in more technical, internal stakeholders that are going to need to help and having to, pass their information. So having something standard where we're all looking at the same data and information makes a customer transition and their experience a lot more seamless and fluid, no matter what stage they are with us.
Agree. And this has been a recent kind of revelation for myself now, running Accord and kind of seeing it more broadly outside of just sales and working deals with my colleagues. It's a company level thing. It's a shared language across product, across, pre and post sales, marketing, et cetera. And I think we kind of think about that, whether you're an IC or manager or VP of sales. Our goal is to close business and to increase revenue. But how we do that is from working with these other teams, and that level of rigor of kind of documenting this and having that shared language is really important to have that alignment, which I think so often isn't there by default of just having different kind of metrics and KPIs that we're tracking towards, right?
Absolutely. Different systems, like every salesperson doesn't want to go into Jira, and it's like, it's really hard to get CS sometimes into the Salesforce, but you're right. It helps.
Elizabeth, your point to the top 10% of the reps, I see that too, like even on my own team, where they've been through so many different trainings and they've been successful, but they're also very, going back to that consciously competent stage. They know what they're doing and they can articulate it to where when you have those deal reviews with them, when you're looking through their pipeline, they can talk about the risks. They can talk about the things that they need to do and strategize and have next steps. And that's when you really know, like, if someone needs to have this, if you really need to focus and shoehorn them into a framework that you're implementing for the sake of having everyone do the same exact thing, or giving them that space to be successful in the lane that they're in, as long as they can articulate why and what and how they're doing it.
Totally. Well, maybe shifting gears to more like, let's get tactical, what's going on today. People are focused on rep productivity now, I think more than ever I've seen in the last, kind of 10 years. There's smaller teams, people are getting cut, there's fewer leads, people are spending less money, there's more key decision makers involved in every deal and finance and all this kind of stuff. How do you think the concept of methodologies and processes kind of maps to what we're seeing today, and how can people use those tools and frameworks as levers for their sales team to win more deals and have more productivity from their sales reps? And maybe Pleasant, we'll start with you and how you're kind of thinking about that with your team at Rollworks.
So data for us is super important. I mean, which I think every company would say. For us, we're pretty data hungry, and we are, especially on the individual level. So I'll tell you about a recent exercise that I literally just got off of the team strategy call with the group I'm working with, where the individual reps have their conversion metrics, they have their stats, they have their what their rates were throughout the funnel from FY22, and then looking at FY23, how does that then equate to what you need to have for this upcoming year? And in this exercise, the accountability was put on them of taking a look at your data. Where is it that you have the biggest gap? And then that's what we're going to focus on to have the most immediate win and move the needle. So a methodology and the framework that we work with, that's where it supports what you're trying to do with your coaching, because you can say, here's where your gap area is, and individualize your focus of let's get you sharpened here. And this is the part of the framework that you need the most support on. And that way you can have an impact, full funnel. So, that's from an efficiency standpoint, I think it's really important to utilize these frameworks in the places where you have the biggest gaps, not try to implement everything all at once, but especially in this economy, where can you have the biggest impact, the fastest, and show progress?
And where are you seeing that, like specifically, what do you think the biggest levers are today in that sales funnel?
So for us, hands down, the top of the funnel, where it's going from like the assessment stage into the validate stage, is where most of the team has identified on their own. I need to do this, and this is where I'm having the gap. And it's back in that discovery process of going back and really, what are the key questions that we're looking for, and reviewing what are we asking? How have those questions changed to really identify different business pains? Because what we thought were the ones before, last year, are very different this year. And so how do we then restructure that portion to actually get the business challenges, be able to articulate the impact that's going to have on your business? Because if we're not converting at that stage, that means we're not capturing what the true business challenge is.
Why is someone going to spend time with you if you're not talking about their number 1, 2, priorities and goals right now, right? Everyone's more focused. So if you miss that, there's no deal.
100%.
Awesome. And Elizabeth, how about, kind of similar question, with the teams that you've run, how have you kind of mapped to the moment in time what the team needs to focus on now, and using that kind of framework and shared language and shared process to kind of have a big impact to those goals?
Yeah, a big strength of mine is the implementation of all of that, right? Like I agree that being data driven on every stage of the funnel is critical. I keep finding I've been through 2 acquisitions and then go back and I end up starting all over at very early stage. And the first thing I do is spend the first month, really on the ground with the AEs, break down every single one of the sales stages, build them up, put in entry and exit criteria at each stage, and then train everybody up on every stage. And that's what I do in the first 30 days, right out of the gate. I think, it takes time to get to a place where you can actually have that measurable data around it. I agree with exactly what Pleasant said. I think it all comes down to discovery, and there's often times when there's a big gap in deals. It can point back to the questions that are being asked early on. And I think this is one of those things, like I come from an enterprise background, but when I was at HelloSign in sales leadership, I was running the mid-market and emerging business AE teams, right? So, there's a big difference between transactional and enterprise deals, right? But like, it's so critical to really go through that discovery process and map all of that out. And I actually I think one of the things, and Ross, you and I have had this conversation, this sounds horrible in this kind of market. And I've lost jobs, and, I'm a little long in the tooth. I've been, this isn't my first rodeo, but, I actually like these kind of markets because I think it really can define the performers, and as somebody who was trying to break into tech later in life, and I joked that when I was in the investment industry, I was the only woman in the room. They were all white men that looked like my dad, and then I went from that to being the oldest person in the room in tech. But it's when things were really booming, some of the tech companies who have really dynamic inbound marketing funnels, all it takes to be a top producer is to be up next in the rotation. So it's like when things start to really, hit the fan, like it's happening now, it really takes doing your research and going through this is when the process matters.
Yeah. You hit on something that, is kind of why we picked this topic now. Obviously harder to close all this stuff, but it really comes down to the job of a modern sales organization is predictability and a sales leader. Yes, it's about deal execution and hiring and all stuff, but what does that map up to? Maps to consistently, predictably hitting your goal. And the only way to do that is, like you said, when things change, we have fewer leads from marketing, like owning your destiny. And the only way to do that is to sell through a proven methodology and process that you've refined over the time of the company. And it always reminds me of kind of the legend of PTC, kind of the best sales team they had. I forget the number of times in a row they hit and exceeded quota, something like 24, something like that, quarters. And the only reason they did that is they said, hey, we're going to develop, and ended up being MEDD came out of this company. We're going to develop a way of talking about deals and qualifying deals to make sure that everything in our pipeline is real. And then we're not going to miss because, this thing happened at the end. We're going to clearly map out every stage and qualify every deal appropriately to make sure that we can predictably hit our goal. And I see this huge shift back to that and the basics. Every single sales leader I'm talking to today is talking about how can we have that level of rigor that just wasn't needed before. And I think as people that took on and had passion for sales, that always executed like that, like Elizabeth, you're saying, it's like, this is just the way I do things. I do things 10 out of 10. It doesn't matter if I didn't need all these stakeholders in the deal, this tight business case, because it was going to close anyway. And that's the muscle that these people have developed because they love the art and the science of sales. And those are the people that are going to succeed right now and step up. And I think what you see is the vast majority of even sales leaders that have had success in multiple companies in the last few years just not be able to cut it because they don't have that level of rigor in their craft. And that's, it's been really, really interesting to see things shake out so far.
Absolutely. And I mean, when I was, this is back when carrying a bag was carrying a bag, it was back in field sales, and there was no such thing as inbound. We didn't have a marketing funnel. We didn't have lead generation. We got a phone book of investment advisors and called on them, and it was like 100% building your own pipeline outbound. And, I have been in a situation that a company, Pluma, was an early stage company. We had no marketing team and no SDR, BDR team, and it was a 100% outbound enterprise play. And, it was, the CEO there was great, but, it ultimately decided to sell the company. But, it was fun. It was fun.
So Pleasant, how is your team kind of adjusting to, I'm guessing, less leads, harder decisions? Like, how are you thinking about everyone kind of owning their destiny more with this increased kind of rigor and kind of process that everyone needs to take on?
Well, I think that there are some reality checks that have to be made. And a lot of times when you're having those conversations, owning the destiny, if you're telling a rep, here's what has to happen. I go back to my teaching days. It's like, there's the instruction level at the instruction. Here's what you need to do versus letting them discover and uncover it themselves and figure out and work out the plan collaboratively with their peers. I think you have a much higher shot of doing the latter, and much higher success rate. So that's one of the things is the team is identifying and doing the work, which is really a shift from traditionally how, we give people quotas. We say like, here's the metrics that you need to hit. Here's the things that you need to do. Here's the things that you need to input into Salesforce versus letting them work those things out of where are the gaps that they need to fill. And that's one of the things. And the other piece too is I think it's really important now, as much as we have a methodology, that you also have your own unique criteria of what a winning deal looks like so that you can de-risk your deals that, reps are giving their gut feeling calling on, or they're saying, well, I know all this, or I have my champion telling me this, here's the signer, here's the person, and, giving you like the medic information. Which sometimes you'll have a single threaded champion that can give you all of that info. And then you're still at the end of the deal. And it's like, well, what happened to that? So it kind of ties into Elizabeth's point with having that, the exit criteria. That's one of the things that we've really tightened and put more rigor around is what are the criteria? How many a winning deal should have an X number of meetings, because, unless it's one of those unicorns that someone calls up and they've done all their research, or a previous user of us. So we only need like 3, meetings. That's the unicorn. And so there's a standard number of deals. We have to, a certain number of buyers on our one deals, this type of executive sponsorship. And so we have these constant set of things that look like a winning deal alongside of what information we need to be collecting along the way to ensure we get to those benchmarks. That's where we really tightened up. It's helpful within conversations then with our reps because it's reality.
And how do you do that in real time? Like a lot of times I find teams have this data and it's kind of in this retrospective where it's too late to interfere on the deal. Oh, shoot, now we have this. Well, we just talked about the importance of discovery and this stuff happening early. How do you think about the enforcement of these things and the exit criteria like in real time while it happens? That's something that I always, kind of have a big question mark around is, the best leaders and managers are able to do this, but in practice, is it just from having the daily stand-ups and knowing exactly what's happening on every deal? Like how do you kind of think about Pleasant doing that? And then same question, Elizabeth, I'm curious to hear kind of how you've done that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe, and when I go in, like, and it was funny because I was hearing, I think oftentimes as sales leaders, the CEOs want them to be player coach. I don't think that model works unless it is really early stage. And I've been in a number of early stage. And I think the first thing I always try to do is close 3 to 5 deals on my own, and so I really understand each one of those stages, and then have the reps sit in on my calls. And then I sit in on theirs. And it's just really getting in, I'm not, I think, like, for example, I think Gong is a great tool, but I don't have a lot of time in my day to go back and listen to previous calls. And I think it's a really impactful conversation in the moment with a rep if you're talking to them and you're on the call, or you can participate and kind of, work together on it, and you start to see trends. So I guess, I think getting to what Pleasant is saying is, I think customers can go dark or whatnot, but when you start to see this happening on a regular basis with a specific rep, there's something broken, and you see that, and I really try to get particularly in this kind of environment, I try to get people to really think about understanding their buyer and understanding their customer and doing your research and being engaged with them. And, it's like, I think one of the things, I get a million emails, I'm sure you guys do too. And it's like, delete, 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 delete. Like, every single email that you send, I'll say to my team, would you respond to that? And if the answer is no, then don't hit send.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And well, maybe going back to the first part that you said, and Pleasant, curious to hear your thoughts, is there's kind of these two opposing thoughts from a sales leadership perspective. One is enable your team to do all the things and you can't be involved. The other is there's no way of knowing for sure unless you know what's actually happening on every deal and getting involved. Elizabeth, sounds like yours is more the former. Pleasant, I'm curious to kind of hear your take on that kind of diametric philosophy of sales leadership.
Yeah, I kind of have a hybrid, more leaning towards Elizabeth's side. So we use Gong. I love Gong, but I like it for the metrics that it gives me. So when I'm looking at things of the calls, the people involved in the calls, and having trackers set up like that. So we're talking about efficiency. We're talking about how do we make this easy to implement, invest in tools that will allow you to do this and not do the manual labor of pulling all the reports or hiring someone that, business analyst, invest in the tools that will help you to implement this. I think it's the first thing, but my style is very much, I know where my strengths are as a sales leader. And I know there's things that I can do and say or relate to people in a way that other people don't have that same skill set. Mm-hmm. So I think if you have a brand new team, it's really important to listen in on calls for sure and understand what their strengths are within the sales process, and for them to know what yours are. And I personally like to be in pricing and negotiation calls. I think that there's a big presence that you can have when you're showing up with someone that has not been on the day-to-day like sales emails and things like that, and then can push in a different way or uncover and ask questions in a more strategic way. So I personally and my team they take advantage of that. But on the other hand too, it's there, you have to have that feedback loop closed of here's why this happened, here's how this happened, and so that they can grow and get better and feel more confident, because you're not always going to be there. I do listen to a lot of calls, and I do call coaching, but more so early in the stage, to where it's not just for me giving feedback, but also start hearing trends and seeing if they can pick up on things that we can implement across a team that will improve everybody versus just a single rep. So that's my slant on it.
Yeah, it's a really tough balance, especially when companies are growing, because it's like you want to improve each individual person, but people change jobs, places in the company, etc., and you're investing the time to up-level someone, but then you still have the quota every month, every quarter, and you need to make sure you're making the most of every deal. And at the end of the day, I think sales leaders obviously should be the best sellers and be able to maybe not say the things on the calls, but better understand the risks, the angles to take. And honestly, recently I'm curious to get, both of your takes on this, especially as it relates to sales process, getting involved at the very start versus the end, I've actually found as the biggest impact. I've gotten very obsessed with this idea behind positioning in sales, kind of taking this idea from marketing. That first conversation or two, especially with a potential decision maker and where it sits on their priority list, because most deals, again, everyone knows, are lost due to kind of prioritization than a competitor. And I think that's where you actually have the most impact, is in that first probably even 10 minutes, 15 minutes of how you position your product in the market, what problems it solves, how much of a priority it potentially is for them. And that's where I actually see, I think, a bigger opportunity for sales leaders to help kind of up level that in the sales process, versus maybe later, maybe you're discovering why you lost at the end and you're losing there, but it's really probably from kind of the prioritization level and that business challenge. Even Pleasant, you mentioned this changing a lot now. It's really hard to kind of adjust the team very quickly to having an ear for in the market, how that's impacting your customers, right?
One of my sellers said something that was spot on, which was, I feel like the longer that I'm here and the more that I learn about the product, the worse I've gotten at discovery, because I'm not asking, the curiosity questions. I'm asking the questions around like the product and the things that we're doing, and the things that we can solve for, versus really capturing the things in the beginning of, why are we having here? How's this going to impact you? And I agree with you. And I think that it's also really important that sellers can differentiate who they're talking to and what they're trying to get out of that person, because you may have a champion that comes to the call with a really strategic priority for them. But if that seller can't also then weave the discovery to find out, how does this tie into the bigger picture, and like, so I hear this is what you've been tasked with by the CEO or CMO. So how is that aligning to some of the other initiatives in the organization? You have just really like siloed yourself, and it's going to be a much more challenging sale when you're going further in the sales process if you're just addressing that one need. So it has to be kind of a balancing act of meeting their needs, but then also bridging that gap.
Totally. Yeah. You get stuck from where you start. Well, we got a few more minutes left, maybe some, and Elizabeth, I'll pass it over to you for maybe some closing thoughts and reflection of all the things that we've been talking about, both kind of at the strategic and tactical level of trying to align, not just one-off things to help close deals, but thinking about kind of the overarching methodology and process that you're kind of providing the sales team.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite thing about my job is team building. And, I think it's like Pleasant saying, being a teacher, and like I'm a mom and was involved in their school. And like, I really, my favorite thing about the job is seeing people be successful and really investing time with them. Right. And like, I'll give you an example. I had one rep that was a couple companies ago, and such a great guy, but could not get anything past that dark stage. And, and he felt that he did a great discovery, and of course was doing 80% of the talking during discovery. And, and so I really came down hard, and it was really, really hard for him. We went through it over and over and over, and, spent a few months, really all of my time invested with this guy. He became by far the best person at MEDD. He had every question. He just got so good at it. And then I really was able to make him kind of a leader in this front and helped him train other people. And, so I think it's, if you can really get ownership, and I think that's coming down to what we were talking about in terms of like down markets, right? Like if you can get them to take ownership of the process, that's where the magic is.
Yeah, I love that, kind of simplifying everything down to, I think obviously a key quality of sales leaders is to take that level of ownership and accountability, but translating that to your team, I think is kind of that next level, right? And moving away from, and both, kind of hearing from how both you talk about your teams feels like kind of innately have this idea of, okay, I'm empowering my team. How am I going to, kind of transmute my feeling of ownership over this team's number to them at that individual level? And that's kind of the secret here. But yeah, Pleasant, any kind of closing thoughts, comments?
I would just say, I've been in multiple organizations that at the time where they haven't had a methodology implemented, and then they have the implementation, and I've had, experience with ones that never have fully adopted a methodology. And so key takeaway would be, don't piecemeal things and, do things on a whim or because it's the hot topic of the moment. I think it's really important for your business to be successful, to do your homework, figure out what's going to be best for your team and have the biggest impact, and then do it right. Don't half-ass it, do it right. Implement it with efficacy, have the support in place to train your sellers and to do the ongoing training, because many times where you see this fail is you get the training done and then it's like, okay, well, we're doing like part of it and like half of it. And, and then you take back a look, look back a year and it's like, well, we kind of, adopted it. And, companies will spend a lot of money on these trainings, drop $500,000 to have someone come in and train their organization.
Yeah.
So be methodical, be thoughtful, and do it in a way where your sellers aren't going to be frustrated because they feel like something new is coming at them, every other month based off of the way the numbers fell. Do it with efficacy.
Totally. Yes. I think that's probably the number one kind of challenge that I've seen from people trying to get to this level of everyone knows it. Yes. I want to particularly hit my number. I want to have this clear methodology. I want to have my process and playbook and all the stuff. It feels very reactive at most companies, Pleasant. I completely agree. It's something that you need to, very similar to like, great marketing channels. It's something that you invested in 3 to 6 months ago. You're not going to see the benefit from forever. And if you're constantly trying to get the benefit of it right away, you're never going to get there. It's the long-term thing. It's doing it on every deal, regardless if it's a bluebird or the hardest deal to close ever, regardless if it's inbound or outbound. Every single day, you need to follow the thing and be committed to it as an organization. So if there is a shift in the market, a big acquisition, this thing happening, you're going to be able to push through it much better than everyone else. And it's a long-term investment. And I think that's what a lot of people are realizing the benefit of now who's done that at their companies. And a lot of people are seeing, oh shit, maybe I need to get more serious about this. So I'm really excited just overall of this kind of moment and opportunity of the space of people realizing the power of that level of consistency and really investing in these things proactively instead of reactively. So
and I think it's worth mentioning too. And I had seen a blog post on LinkedIn say, "Oh, MEDD started in the 1990s and it's obsolete now," and it's not. I mean, if you look at I learned MEDD at HelloSign, and then we were acquired by Dropbox. Both of them are Y Combinator companies, and they have very similar, methodologies and processes in place, even though Dropbox was a big publicly traded company. But if you look at all of the best companies, Snowflake uses MEDD, there's a reason that these companies are successful.
Yeah.
Totally. It's not by chance. This stuff doesn't happen by chance. People think, oh, so much better product market fit, whatever. Like there's a way to orchestrate and own your destiny. We're talking about at the deal level, but also at the company level. And this is the proven way to do that decade after decade. And even going before MEDD, this stuff was just reinvented with a different name. This has been happening since sales was invented, the turn of the century, and knocking on doors. And it's just kind of funny that, I'm excited that it's having a big resurgence, right now. So awesome. Well, I appreciate you both coming in and sharing all of your hard-earned learnings from, running teams and everything. And hopefully this was helpful for both the folks listening live and the vast majority of people that'll probably be checking this out, async and on the recording. And if you want to reach out to Pleasant and Elizabeth, we just added in the chat. Thank you, Danny, the LinkedIn's. So any kind of, final parting words, Pleasant and Elizabeth, before we sign off here?
I just thank you for inviting me to be a part of this.
Awesome.
Yeah, likewise, Ross. It's always a pleasure chatting and Pleasant. It's great getting to know you as well.
Yep, you're the same.
Cool. Well, have a great rest of the day, Friday, and awesome weekend, and appreciate you sharing your insights with the community here.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.